Lights, camera, action. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name's Ezra Elisoff. I work here at Sealaska Heritage Institute in the Education Department, and I would like to gently remind everyone that if you have any food or drinks, please leave them outside on the desk that's just right outside of the clan house. So today, it is my great honor to welcome you all here to our third and final lecture in our lecture series. Today's lecture is titled Our Voices, Our Future, How Technology Can Empower Indigenous Language Revitalization and Preservation. This is the third and final lecture in our lecture series of 3. The theme is titled The Future of Indigenous Languages. At Sealaska Heritage Institute, we are deeply committed to growing new generations of speakers by supporting and uplifting both language teachers and learners. This lecture series is part of that broader effort, offering a space to explore how technology can play a vital role in strengthening and sustaining language revitalization across our communities. On Monday, April 28th, our second lecturer, Dr. Rolando Coto Solano, explored how advancing technologies can help shape and strengthen the future of Indigenous languages. You can watch his lecture and any others we host on SHI's YouTube page. While today marks the final lecture in our technology and language-focused lectures, Sealaska Heritage Institute's spring lecture series continues throughout May, featuring prominent speakers in Indigenous knowledge, art, culture, and language. Tomorrow at 3 p.m., Wayne Price will present his lecture titled A Career in Northwest Coast Arts. Today's lecturer, Nathan Bennett, will talk about how his work on artificial intelligence and machine learning and how it can assist in language revitalization through AI transcription in the form of speech-to-text, pronunciation support from text-to-speech, and other language learning tools. Nathan Bennett is a senior software engineer at Microsoft with over 21 years of experience in technology, specializing in platform development, intelligent systems, and large-scale infrastructure. His work focuses on designing and developing advanced platform services, including intelligent routing, advanced calling scenarios, and Microsoft Teams components, while enabling scalable and efficient communication solutions for developers worldwide. While his expertise occasionally intersects with AI, his primary focus is in software architecture, systems engineering, and problem solving at large scale. Nathan's career began in the United States Air Force, where he served as a systems operator, later transitioning into military contracting roles in systems and network engineering. Over time, he shifted into software development and project management, allowing him to bridge the gap between technical solutions and real-world applications. His experience in managing and scaling technology solutions has fueled his interest in how emerging digital tools can be applied to Indigenous language preservation and revitalization. As a Sealaska shareholder and a citizen of the Central Council of the Tlingit and Haida tribes of Alaska, Nathan has been actively reconnecting with his Haida heritage through language learning, cultural practices, and community engagement. For the past 6 months, he has been studying Hadkil language classes and has begun exploring traditional Haida carving and cultural craftsmanship. Outside of work and cultural advocacy, Nathan is a father, an avid reader, and a Brazilian jiu-jitsu enthusiast. Following the lecture, there will be an opportunity for questions. If you're joining us online, you can ask questions in the comments section, and I'll read them out loud to our lecturer here. But without further ado, please help me welcome Nathan Bennett.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Nathan Bennett, a senior software engineer at Microsoft, but more importantly here, a member of the Central Council of Tlingit and Haida Tribes of Alaska, and a Sealaska shareholder. My career is in software, architecture, and infrastructure, not AI or linguistics. So today, you may hear me explain some linguistic concepts you all know far better than I do, and that's okay. Please laugh with me, correct me, and share your wisdom. I've been reconnecting with my own Haida heritage, learning how to kill, traditional carving, and mispronouncing lots and lots of words. But I believe technology, when guided by the community, can support and empower our efforts to revitalize language and culture, not replace them. Thank you for being here today. I'm excited to walk with you through how technology can be a tool and not a substitute in this work. Before we dive deeper into the heart of today's discussion, let's quickly look at the path we'll follow together. Here's the roadmap for today. First, we'll ground ourselves in why Indigenous languages are vital, not just for communication, but for identity, cultural knowledge, and belonging. Then we'll explore why Indigenous languages require special AI approaches, and how standard technologies fall short without cultural and linguistic tuning. From there, we'll move into the building blocks, understanding key AI concepts, like how models are trained, how data needs to be prepared, and why handling dialect and orthography differences matters so much. Critically, we'll talk about governance, why strong community control, collaboration across organizations, and Indigenous data sovereignty are essential to building trustworthy systems. Then we'll look outward, reviewing case studies from other Indigenous language projects, what worked, what didn't, and what lessons we can apply. Finally, we'll outline a roadmap, starting small, scaling carefully, and dreaming bigger for the future. Now let's begin with grounding ourselves in why this work matters so deeply. Indigenous languages are more than just communication systems. They're the carriers of our worldview, traditional knowledge, and ancestral relationships. Colonialization, forced assimilation, and modernization has disrupted the natural transmission of these languages, and today many are at risk. Yet language lives in the recordings, in stories, in elders' memories, and in the hearts of us learners. Technology, if approached carefully, ethically, and under community control, can help us reconnect future generations to these languages. AI isn't a replacement for living knowledge. It's a tool that can help us teach, document, and share. But for AI to truly help, we need to understand how Indigenous languages are fundamentally different from the languages most AI systems were designed to handle. These standard AI models, they were trained on English, Spanish, and Mandarin. Languages with shorter words, fixed grammar, and predictable sentence structures. But Indigenous languages like Haida, Tlingit, or Tsimshian are polysynthetic, meaning a single word can express an entire sentence's worth of meaning. Verbs in particular are packed with information. Subject, object, aspect, tense, mood, all bundled into one single complex form. We don't always need to follow English word order either. Take Sm'algyax, for example. It usually puts the verb first, then subject, then object. That's the natural rhythm of the language. And when we build language tools, we need to respect that flow, not force everything into English-style patterns. These features are what makes Indigenous languages so beautiful. But they also create huge challenges for AI models that assume normal English-style patterns. Let's take an even closer look at the specific challenges posed by our languages. Now, as we zoom into these, Haida, it uses a direct inverse system based on animacy, meaning who acts on whom changes depending on the relative aliveness or importance of the participants. And Tlingit verbs are some of the most complex in the world, built with prefixes, infixes, suffixes, and internal sound shifts. And AI systems struggle to parse this layered structure without explicit rules. Tsimshian follows an ergative absolutive system, meaning the subjects and objects, are marked differently than in English. And this totally confuses systems expecting an English-style logic. The takeaway, off-the-shelf AI won't work for these languages. We must retune and build culturally specific systems that honor the linguistic structures we're working to protect. Now that we understand why AI approaches don't fit, let's explore how AI models actually work and what makes them tick. This slide introduces core components that AI systems work with our language. First, we have ASR, or automatic speech recognition. This is what turns spoken words into text. Then, TTS, or text-to-speech, which does the opposite. And it reads out written text and turns it into audio. And then there's NLP, or natural language processing, which is kind of the umbrella term for all ways AI can understand and generate human language. NLP doesn't just look at one single word at a time. It tries to understand the meaning across the entire sentence. It's a little like when I mumble through a story. You can still figure out what I meant, even if half the words get lost. NLP does the same thing, just faster, and hopefully with a lot less mumbling. Even if AI misses a word or two, NLP helps figure out the full idea. Much like when we understand someone, even if their speech is muffled or cut off. And this is really important for Indigenous languages, where meaning often comes from the relationships between parts of a word or phrase, and not just the individual words. But these models, they just don't magically work on their own. They have to be carefully trained, and that's where this flowchart on the right shows. AI takes in labeled examples, either text or speech, and it makes an output. It compares that output to what it should have been, calculates the error, and makes adjustments. And over many cycles of input, error, and adjustment, the model slowly gets better. However, and this is key, the quality of the data determines the quality of the learning. And that's where data preparation comes in. Tokenization means breaking words into smaller phrases so AI can better understand them. Or segmentation is where we make sure those pieces are grouped together meaningfully, like syllables, phrases, and morphemes. And then annotation, where we can add extra context, like whether something's a noun, a verb, the dialect it belongs to, or the cultural meaning or significance. These are especially important for polysynthetic languages. Without this careful preparation, the AI models will either miss the point completely, or worse, learn wrong patterns. This slide covers two important ideas: how AI learns and how we protect what matters. Let's start on the left. AI systems learn through training. They need lots of labeled examples to get smarter. But what if we don't have thousands of hours of recordings? That's where transfer learning comes in. We can think of it like this. Imagine teaching someone who already speaks Finnish how to understand Northern Sami. They already know some grammar patterns and sounds. You don't have to start from ground zero. You just have to adapt to their existing knowledge. In AI, we can do the same. We can start with a model trained on a related language and fine-tune it to handle ours. This makes it possible to build strong systems even with limited data, like the Maori or Sami. Protecting our data is non-negotiable. Our languages carry sacred knowledge, and some content is sensitive, and not everything should be open to the world. That's why we build in layers of protection. RBAC, or role-based access control, ensures only authorized people can see certain materials. And then encryption, where we protect the data itself, making it unreadable to outsiders. And secure hosting, which keeps everything stored safely in a trusted environment. These protections aren't just technical. They're about respect, cultural sovereignty, and long-term trust. As we collaborate across different communities and organizations. Technology protects our data, but it also must protect our ways of learning. Technology should support our languages and not replace our traditions. If we're not careful, AI tools could unintentionally weaken traditional face-to-face learning methods, or even spread inaccuracies if they're trained wrong. One risk is the over-reliance on technology. Face-to-face teaching, mentorship, and community storytelling must remain at the heart of language revitalization. Another danger is data inaccuracies. If the data we feed AI is flawed, inconsistent, biased, or incomplete, the AI will repeat and even amplify those mistakes. And finally, ethical considerations. We have to ensure the AI model doesn't produce outputs that are culturally insensitive or reinforce harmful stereotypes. When evaluating external partners, we should always ask, how will you ensure cultural authenticity? What validation processes are in place before deploying AI outputs to our communities? AI can empower us, but only when it's grounded in our cultural views, not just technical ambition. AI isn't just one big thing, it's many models working together. So in this example, we have text-to-speech, or an ASI model, which is critical for transcribing elders' oral stories into text so that they can be preserved and taught. Second, we have text-to-speech, which allows us to take that text and turn it back into spoken audio, which is especially powerful for learners who need to hear that pronunciation. And third, phenome recognition, which helps AI detect unique sounds of the language and eventually provide real-time pronunciation feedback to learners. Together, these three models lay the foundation for both documentation and active teaching of the language. Many Indigenous languages are polysynthetic, again meaning one word can pack in a lot of meaning. That's why morphological analysis is so important. It helps AI break down words into roots, prefixes, suffixes, and grammatical markers. Once AI understands structure and meaning, it can help with translations too, from Indigenous languages into English or vice versa. Now, by combining these models, we can create incredible applications where we can record an elder speaking using ASR, analyze the meaning inside their words using morphology, or convert that into speech with text-to-speech. And then we can feed it into chatbots, interactive applications, or even virtual reality storytelling worlds. It's not about preserving the language. It's about bringing it to life for future generations. Here's where it starts to get exciting. These models let us build tools that make language learning active and not passive. Imagine an elder chatbot, an AI that responds in our Indigenous language, using real elders' voices, offering conversational practice for learners at any time. Or a storytelling assistant, where AI narrates cultural stories and even breaks down the language structure so learners can better understand morphemes, grammar, and meaning. And finally, a smart pronunciation app, where you can speak a phrase into your phone and it gently points out areas to improve, helping you learn sounds in real time. These are very achievable if we have well-labeled language data and a governance structure that protects cultural integrity. In this visual here, we have an AI pipeline flow. We'll start on the left with raw data, either audio recordings from elders or text documents like stories, oral interviews. Both types of data need to be cleaned and prepared, removing noise, parsing formats, and segmenting them into manageable pieces. Once cleaned, both types of data are then labeled, where language experts tag information like orthography, morphemes, pronunciation, and meaning. From there, the tag corpus moves into model training, building our ASR, text-to-speech, and morphology models. After training, these models are securely deployed with strong data protections like RBAC. Finally, the real-world tools, apps, chatbots, and e-learning platforms are created and made available. And importantly, everything loops back to the community for ongoing feedback, corrections, and cultural oversight. This is a living system, guided by the community, not just machines. Data labeling is the foundation of this entire process. There's a saying in tech, garbage in and garbage out. If we feed AI bad examples, we're going to get bad results. We can take this real story from the Juno Empire. They asked ChatGPT to write a story in Tlingit. When Professor Lance Twitchell reviewed the story with his students, they all laughed at it and said, this is total nonsense. It's not even close. That's not because AI can't learn. It's because it needs proper guidance. And that starts with us. That's why we need elders, linguists, and language stewards involved in the data tagging process to ensure accuracy, context, and cultural respect. Now let's look at what data tagging actually looks like in practice. This table shows just how detailed proper data tagging needs to be. We log everything, the file name and date, so we can track recordings properly, the language and orthographic form, so we can show exactly how words are written, the phonetic IPA to document every sound, morpheme breakdown and glosses, which are crucial for polysynthetic languages, where every word contains multiple layers of meaning, the English translation, which is useful for bilingual tools, and speaker metadata and dialect tags, so AI can recognize pronunciation or usage between regions and speakers. It's meticulous work, but this is where the true preservation happens. This is how we make sure AI respects and not flattens the beauty and complexity of our languages. Now we're lucky. Many communities already have recordings, cassette tapes, VHS, DVDs, and digital files. These are rich with elders' voices and legacy stories. But often they're missing context, no speaker ID, dialect info, or translation. That's what we call pre-recorded data, valuable but messy. On the other hand, when we collect new data, we can control everything. Record in a quiet space, capture dialect and speaker details, tag it right from the beginning. But that takes effort, scheduling elders, training collectors, and organizing workshops. The best path forward is we try to do both. Digitize and rescue old recordings while creating new, clean data for the future. But once we get all this audio and text, there's one more thing that really trips up AI, and that's how differently our languages are written and spoken. Many indigenous languages don't just have one writing system, or even one official pronunciation. For example, Haida from Skidegate is not identical to Haida from Masset or Kaigani. Even orthography might differ between a 1980s language guide and a modern dictionary. If we don't tell AI what's going on, if we don't label these differences, it will treat them as mistakes. And that's when things go sideways. The AI blends dialects, flattens distinctions, or mislearns entirely. And we don't want to erase diversity. We want to celebrate it. So what do we do about these differences? We honor them. And let's talk about how we can do that. Here's how we handle orthography and dialect variations responsibly. We tag everything. Every word or phrase is labeled with its dialect, orthography, and all metadata needed. We build in user choice into our applications. When we design apps or chatbots, we let learners pick which writing systems or pronunciation style they prefer. And we have community validation, where elders, linguists, and fluent speakers help verify what's correct and offer corrections as these models evolve. This ensures that AI serves the diversity of our communities, instead of forcing everyone into a single mold. Technology should adapt to our ways, and not the other way around. When working with Indigenous AI projects, no single organization should act alone. That's why a governing body is so important. A council made up of nonprofits, universities, tribes, and community partners. And here's the key. Each organization keeps full ownership of the data they contribute. But the governing body oversees the shared outputs, like trained AI models or learning applications. ensuring that decisions reflect the full range of voices. This type of structure builds long-term trust and protects work for future generations, not just the lifespan of any one group. Let's look how governance can protect sensitive cultural data. First, all data goes into a secure data vault, encrypted and stored safely. That way, only people with the right permissions can access certain materials. And that lets us separate general learning content, things like greetings, common phrases, from sensitive content, like ceremonial language, sacred knowledge. And most importantly, this prevents exploitation. No one should profit from community data without full informed consent. Here's a simple breakdown of how RBAC works. On the left, the tribal council or governing body sets the rules. Who can access what and how? Then we split it here into two paths. On top, we have the public data, like phrases, songs, or educational materials. And on bottom, sensitive content, like stories, ceremonies, languages used in specific cultural contexts. Both are stored securely, but the access is different. The permissions are predefined and enforced. The goal is to empower the community to share knowledge safely, honoring traditions while embracing new tools. Now, no one can carry all the knowledge, and they shouldn't have to. And that's why collaboration here is key. When nonprofits, universities, and tribes pool resources, we all benefit. Organizations that contribute data get access to the tools that are built. It's a give and gain ecosystem. To keep things fair, we form a joint oversight board with reps from every group, ensuring decisions are community-driven. Now, AI is not just a set it and forget it tool. It needs care. Ongoing updates are essential as new phrases are recorded or as orthographies evolve. Community feedback is part of this process, especially from elders, teachers, and learners. We also track every change through version control. So if an update causes issues, we can roll it back safely. Otherwise, it's like teaching a parrot a wrong word or something not very nice. Once it learns it, it's really hard to fix, and that can be a problem. A strong governance isn't just about protecting data. It's about who controls it. All models stay under tribal or cultural ownership. RBAC ensures that sacred content, like origin stories or ceremonial terms, is only shared with those who have the right to see it. This isn't about privacy. It's about respect. With encryption and secure hosting, we protect those from theft and misuse. Again, this is not just about technology. It's about sovereignty, respect, and protecting living culture for the next generation. Data sovereignty means our communities have control over how data is used, and not outsiders. We can learn a lot from the Maori Data Sovereignty Framework, which ensures all data stays in community hands, and the First Peoples Cultural Council in Canada, which offers ethical guidelines and shared governance for language work. It's not just about storage. It's about how the data is governed, how it moves, and who decides that. Census data, it doesn't teach us language, but it's a powerful support tool. It helps us see where our speakers are, target different age groups, and track changes in fluency over time. We can also use it to make a case for funding, tailor learning programs, and build policies based on real need. The Te Kahui Rawaunga is a leading example from New Zealand. But it's important to understand, this is not just about managing data. They're reclaiming control over how data is interpreted and used. Their systems is grounded in Maori values. The whakapapa, which is the value around genealogy and deep ancestral connection. Or the tikanga, which outlines the cultural protocols and traditions. And the mana tuhake, which outlines our values for self-determination and independence. It's built by and for the Maori tribes, not for external researchers or corporations. This is a living, value-driven model. It's not a cold spreadsheet or a digital archive. Every decision is tied back to the community, its priorities, cultural integrity, and protection for the future generations. This slide gives us a clearer picture on how that model actually works in practice. At the top, the iwi leaders, they set the protocols. What can be accessed, by whom, under what circumstances, and even when. But that's not static. Cultural validation is a continuous process. At every step, leaders ask, is this interpretation still aligned with our values? Are we upholding what matters most? And this is crucial. It's not about who has access. It's about who carries the responsibility to protect and honor the data. This is what we mean by relational data governance. Not just compliance, but trust, culture, and accountability woven into this process. The Te Kahu Rarounga gives us a powerful lesson in how Indigenous governance can work, not just technically, but culturally. First, data is not neutral. It carries our values, histories, and power. The way it's gathered, stored, and used reflects who controls the narrative. So we can't treat it as just numbers or files. It's part of our story. Second, sovereignty requires structure. It's not enough to say the community owns the data. We also need systems, policies, platforms, and decision-making processes. That makes the ownership real. That includes building technical capacity so our own people can actually implement and enforce these structures. And third, relational accountability matters. Access is not the end goal, it's responsibility. Responsibility to the ancestors who carried this knowledge, to the youth learning it now, and to each other. This is a reminder, ethical AI for Indigenous languages isn't about avoiding harm. It's about actively aligning with Indigenous ways of relating, remembering, and protecting knowledge. One of the most important takeaways from the Maori and First Peoples models is this. Language AI projects thrive when no single organization holds all the power. Instead, shared governance means forming a council made up of language keepers, educators, tribal councils, linguists, and community advocates, where everyone that contributes has a say. And here's the beauty of it. Each group still owns its own data. No one gives up their rights or controls. What's shared are the governed collectively, the outputs, the models, the applications, and the rules about how these tools can evolve and who they can serve. This structure promotes balance, trust, and long-term sustainability. So the work continues beyond any one grant cycle, leadership change, or technical partner. And there's one more thing to consider, especially for languages like ours. Our communities span international borders, from Southeast Alaska into Canada. That means our governance models need to respect data sovereignty in the US and in Canada. Thinking carefully about where the data lives, who can access it, and how decisions are made. The goal is to honor all Indigenous nations involved, not just the funders or the hosts. Fortunately, we've seen this work. Projects like the Te Kahu Rarounga show us that shared governance across these systems is possible. With the right values, we can build something that truly reflects our ways. Here are a couple of real-world examples of applications that communities have gotten especially excited about. Elder Chatbot, using historic recordings or new contributions from fluent speakers, we can train a chatbot to respond in the Indigenous language. The goal isn't just to create a new language tool, but to preserve the cadence, voice, and spirit of our elders. Imagine a virtual mentor, one that's always available, always patient, and rooted in cultural knowledge. or assisted storytelling, where we can picture an interactive app that brings oral stories to life. It can play the story in both our Indigenous language and English, while highlighting cultural markers like clan crests, traditional territories, or mythological figures. As the story unfolds, it transforms passive listening into an immersive, culturally grounded learning experience. Beyond those initial tools, even more exciting possibilities emerge as our models become more sophisticated. Smart pronunciation tools, where we can imagine speaking into our phone and getting instant feedback on pronunciation. Not just whether it's right or wrong, but visual cues, like a waveform comparisons, a green, yellow, red light indicator, which could be a game changer, especially for new learners, youth, or those learning independently. We have cultural, virtual reality, or augmented reality, where we can think about entering a virtual Haida longhouse or walking through a Tlingit village in augmented reality. Every artifact is labeled and pronounced aloud in the Indigenous language. Or imagine stepping into a Sm'algyax speaking fishing camp along the Skeena River. Each canoe, net, and carving is labeled, and the words are spoken aloud as you explore. It transforms ancestral practices into an immersive learning experience, blending cultural memory with wisdom and technology. This blends our heritage with cutting-edge tech, turning cultural spaces into living classrooms. And then community learning apps. We can build applications that track our learning progress, where learners earn badges for milestones like mastering a verb set or passing a quiz on morphemes. These tools can be adapted for all ages, making language learning more engaging and playful while still deeply rooted in purpose. Now we can take a quick look at what's already been achieved. The Maori and Hawaiian communities, they're leading in Indigenous language AI space. They've shown us what success looks like. They ensure community-led labeling and oversight, respect dialect and orthography variations, retain control over their recordings and models. Their tools include chatbots, text-to-speech systems for multiple dialects, and strong ethical safeguards, like secure hosting, usage policies that honor cultural protocols. These examples remind us we don't need to start from scratch. We can adapt proven strategies, but align them with our own values, our own dialects, and our own ways of knowing. Many Indigenous communities have faced challenges similar to ours, with few fluent speakers, limited data, and complex languages. But they've still found powerful paths forward. For example, the Maori team paired elder recordings with strong community oversight, improving model accuracy through local leadership. Hawaiian projects showed how written texts, like stories and books, can help train AI, even when audio is scarce. And the Inuit, with their complex words, succeeded through smart linguistic strategies like syllable-based tokenization. And the Northern Sami used multilingual transfer learning, borrowing from Finnish and Estonian, to lift up their smaller language. The common thread, they didn't try to force their language into generic AI pipelines. They led with culture, linguistic expertise, and innovation. The Maui ASR project is a standout example of how Indigenous innovation can drive AI success. They began with limited data, just a few hundred hours of elder speech, and they faced the challenge of complex phonology, but with community validation, creative use of synthetic speech, and constant model updates, they were able to cut their word error rate from over 40% to under 10. Their success reminds us we don't need massive data sets. We need leadership, collaboration, and purpose. Hawaiian faced a different obstacle. Very little recorded speech, but they didn't stop. They used about 1.5 million words from written text to build useful tools, showing that books, archives, and cultural records are powerful assets. The Inuit tackled another challenge: complex polysynthetic words, where a word can carry the entire meaning of a full English sentence. Their teams applied smart tokenization strategies, breaking words into syllables for better model understanding. The takeaway: we must honor the structure of each language, not try to force it into English-based systems. The Northern Sami had extremely limited data, far less than the Maori or Hawaiian. But instead of starting from scratch, they trained on Finnish and Estonian first, then fine-tuned their models for Sami. Multilingual transfer approach gave them a huge boost in accuracy. The lesson here is that even with small data sets, when we strategically build on related languages, we don't always have to build alone. We can borrow from the strength where it's culturally and linguistically appropriate. The Navajo give us a powerful warning and solution. Early AI tools from major companies couldn't even recognize their language. Only after linguists, community members, created specific Navajo-specific examples, tuned for its unique grammar and word structure, did these models actually start to work. The lesson here is clear. Indigenous languages cannot be treated like just another setting. They need custom-built models that respect culture, morphology, and meaning. This is why Indigenous leadership is not optional. It's essential. Across all of these examples, 5 success patterns emerge. Cultural ownership, or community ownership. Communities must guide how the data is used, ensuring tools stay rooted in culture. Creative data use, whether it's written text, multilingual training, or something else, every resource can be valuable. Linguistic customization. Success comes from tailoring models to the structure of the language, and not the other way around. Multilingual boosts. Related languages can help us get started. We can stand on each other's shoulders. And iterative validation. These projects don't succeed in one shot. They grow through community testing, feedback, and refinement. If we want AI to serve our language revitalization efforts, we need to braid all of these into our work. Now that we've learned from some other global examples, it's time we apply those lessons in our own way. To succeed, we need 4 core building blocks. First, prioritize community ownership. Indigenous voices must lead every step, from data collection to how these tools are used. Second, build small, then expand. Start with a pilot project, gather real feedback, and then scale thoughtfully. And third, embed linguistic knowledge early. Don't treat language experts as an afterthought. Their input is foundational, not optional. And finally, respecting international partnerships. For languages that span borders like ours, our collaborations must honor the sovereignty in each nation. When it comes to drafting RFPs, the details matter, and so do our expectations. Start by asking how vendors will ensure community oversight. Don't settle for surface-level inclusion. Push for solutions on data scarcity. We're not just looking for more data. We want creative approaches like transfer learning or cross-lingual modeling. Prioritize linguistic customization. Tools must adapt to our languages and not force us to adapt to the tools. And perhaps most importantly, demand cultural validation. Real elders and speakers must review outputs before anything goes live. This is about integrity, not just function. In collaboration, it's not just about pooling resources. It's about building lasting strength. Let's train local community members, not just bring in outside contractors. Capacity stays when the expertise stays local. Field work is key. Getting out to remote villages, recording new stories, and reconnecting with fluent speakers in their home environment. And through hands-on workshops, we build up the skills within our own people. creating a pipeline of Indigenous technologists, linguists, and digital stewards. And if we take this one step further, imagine these language projects weren't just separate efforts, but part of a shared ecosystem, a place where tools, knowledge, and breakthroughs flow across languages, lifting everyone up while still honoring this distinct spirit of each language. By weaving our efforts together, we can create something even stronger than any single project could achieve alone. This is how we scale, wisely, with community at the center. We begin with a minimal viable product, just a basic speech-to-text or text-to-speech model. These offer immediate value, and they're very easy to test. Then, build in community feedback loops. Make it normal for learners, elders, and developers to co-design together. As confidence and capacity grows, expand to more complex features like morphology, translation, and conversational flow. And repeat the cycle, refine, test, and scale, always staying rooted in what the community actually wants and needs. This work isn't about saving a language. It's about imagining what's possible once it thrives again. Whether it's a virtual reality world where you explore artifacts as our ancestors once did, seeing them through their eyes and learning about them in our own language, or gamified apps where children play their way into language fluency, earning badges for recognizing morphemes or mastering verb forms, or a network of intertribal cultural exchange hubs where communities across regions share tools, training, and wisdom. That's how we build sustained language vitality, not just for this generation, but for the ones to come. To summarize, Indigenous ownership must drive every AI language project. We must honor the structure and spirit of each language, not force it into outside molds. Even with limited resources, creative data strategies make this possible. And by working together across tribes, nations, and fields, we can create tools that aren't just effective, but lasting and culturally true. So, thank you to Sealaska Heritage Institute for hosting this important gathering and your dedication for protecting Indigenous knowledge. I'm especially grateful for Ezra for coordinating everything and making the presentation possible. It's an honor to be here today. The work of revitalizing our languages and traditions through AI is just the beginning. And it must be led by our communities, grounded in our values, and protected with care. If you're a language teacher, a technologist, a culture bearer, or someone who believes in the power of Indigenous futures, I invite you to connect. Let's build together, learn together, and ensure our languages and ways of knowing thrive for generations to come. And that brings us to the conversation part. I'll open it up to all of you. I want to know if you guys have any orthography or dialect concerns. Are there ownership or privacy or data sovereignty topics you want to explore deeper? Or maybe an application that you'd love to see, or a way these models could be used in classrooms, homes, or community programs. AI for Indigenous language revitalization must be a partnership, never a top-down system. The best ideas come when the whole community contributes. So please feel free to share any questions, concerns, ideas, or hopes of what you'd like to see in the future. Thank you.
Going to sheesh Nathan. At this time, we'll take questions, or Nathan will answer any questions that the audience have, both in person and online. We have one comment / question from Lance Twitchell online. He said, Gunashish, for sharing your thoughts and work. Lingít has lots of components in a verb that interact with one another when conjugating. Do you think AI can learn that and also assist learners?
Yeah. So I didn't spend a ton of time on it when we were reviewing the deck, but Inuit had a very similar problems, and I would encourage languages like ours to follow what they did. They used smart tokenization strategies, where they were breaking up these parts of the words, grouping together and segmenting them, and training the models based on that. And I think that that's a similar model that our languages would have to follow to kind of work on some of the difficulties with the verb forms in Tlingit.
You spoke briefly about the need for workforce development and having sort of growing your own talent to support it. What are the key elements that you see in that? What do we need that workforce to do besides, I see tagging as a need, but other skills?
Right. So, I mean, I believe this needs to be, part of, a field that we start developing and getting more into. People need to really be familiar with these topics. This mystery behind AI, it shouldn't be a mystery to us. These are models that are getting trained, and they're getting trained with lots of data that people are collecting, from other members in the communities. So building skills like folks that can go out to remote villages, collect data, work with elders, and work with language stewards who can come back and properly tag this data, training those skills up, those linguistic skills for how to tag the orthography, the dialect, or the phonemes, within this is very helpful. And then having those folks work with technologists to set up these secure environments. I spoke briefly about the secure environments here. What does that actually mean, right? This is where, we have the question, do we put this in the cloud, or do we put this somewhere private that we own, right? And what are the differences between that? When we put something in the cloud, we can lock it down with encryption. We can make sure it can only be connected to by VPN over an encrypted network. We can make sure, again, all of those files and models are trained with only the minimum set of permissions allowed, and make sure that any hosts or anything connecting to those networks are patched with all the recent security updates and things like that. So I think that these things, these are conversations on what skills, what do people need to be comfortable using. They need to learn how this technology works. It doesn't need to be a mystery anymore. We need to all understand it and be on the same level and just talk about it. And then, build up skills where we can have people that are actually running this and coming up with new ideas and making breakthroughs in our communities in this space, rather than letting, other companies or AI engineers tell us what to do.
We have one comment online that said, I'm curious to what AI platform y'all are using to make this happen. I use ChatGPT currently. It's the conjugation where sounds change during conjugation that causes me the most difficulty.
So, as far as this, I would say ChatGPT is not a model that we're trying to train a new language on. It's already been trained. We're asking it questions, it's learning from us, and it's generating responses. And what we're looking to do is build new models that understand, and they have a specific purpose, right? Whether it's to understand what's spoken, whether it's to generate text, to understand these sound shifts and build them together so we can build these applications that discussed. The ChatGPT, everyone hears AI, I feel, and they automatically go to that because that's the example that we have out there. That's not the only thing AI does. It does a lot of things. That's just one model that we find millions of times over and over and over again to be able to give us responses when we talk to it. And that's not exactly what we're building here.
So I liked your slide about the request for proposal map and what to look for, but I guess, and I also appreciated the points about collaboration and this can't be any one entity or organization doing this. And so if we're thinking about, sustainability and training a workforce to be able to continue this kind of thing, but what kind of thing do we hire out for? What kind of thing do we put out an RFP for? Like, is that the coders, the server, like the part that's beyond maybe what the tribe and nonprofit and universities can provide? Or how do the other language groups that you mentioned, like what do they hire out for and what do they keep internal?
Right. So I think when I'm discussing this RFP, and maybe even where do we start, right? Like with a minimal viable product. What can we show that has value to us to get everyone excited so we can apply for the next grant because we have a working model now, right? So we build something small that we don't need to partner with a university or somebody that is working deeply in maybe indigenous AI, language revitalization efforts. We build a product like that can help us pronounce words, right? It's not really that complicated. It's just listening to our data, trading it over and over and over again, and then somebody can speak to it, and it could correct them, right? And we show that with value. We start to train up the skills. It's still going to take hundreds of examples of what words we want to train it on for people to pronounce, right? So we're starting from there, building the skills of how do we tag this data? How do we set it up? How do we store it? How do we set up these environments, right? Sure, you're going to probably need somebody that can help you explain this stuff, but that's where you start documenting and start owning that ownership and owning those skills, and hopefully employing Indigenous folks to manage this, and figuring out how do we keep those positions and those things for ongoing updates and care, like keep people trained up, make sure they're ongoing with their own learning and using the best practices, and then from there, to your second point. Once we start to get serious, once we build something that everyone's excited about, and we think about our long-term picture, that's when we are going to need, some help. These, very complex languages I talked about with, using tokenization and segmenting strategies. It's not something that most AI models are doing, and most AI companies are looking at doing super deeply. So we need to find folks that have done this stuff in the past and work with them and partner with them for the long-term kind of care of this, and then build those skills internally until, we're the subject matter experts in our own models and our own applications.
We have another comment online that said from Alexander. He said, "Hello, Nef," and then I don't know what he said after that. I can't read Hadkil.
That's my uncle. How well, Big Bear?
I'm assuming he just said he's proud of you. I don't know. And then after that, there's another question from Rune Lance Twitchell. He said, when thinking of data sovereignty, how do we localize this data and also increase the local knowledge on how to code and manage AI systems so they are locally housed? And then he followed up with the saying, oh, never mind. He was the comment asking to speak a little closer to the mic.
No, that's a good question, and these are the mysteries that we need to kind of solve here with this. So, it seems like a question that's been asked a few times. How do we train, local people to start getting these skills? So these folks are going to need to start taking classes. They're going to need to start getting comfortable with this. They're going to need to start giving talks and getting everybody in these different organizations comfortable with these terms. And we need to really put these folks in specialized training to understand this stuff. And they'll be the ones with the responsibility to go ahead and put these protections in place. So we make sure things are encrypted. We make sure nobody can access these environments. We make sure things are patched appropriately so they can't be hacked, right? We make sure that those skills develop. Now at first, it's gonna take a little bit of time and we may need some help from outsiders, but we need to work with other companies that are willing to train us, that are willing to help instill those skills, offer suggestions for how we can learn more, and build our own developers, build our own network engineers, systems engineers, security managers, right? And that's how we protect this all and make sure that we build that knowledge up for what we're trying to accomplish.
Jadi tui dan king's age to good and I log and so one of my really heartburn problems currently with AI is, and I know other people have had the same experience where you try to look up your language on existing AI platforms, and it's putting out really wrong information, and it's putting it out there as fact. It's not saying it might be this, or there's no reference for you to check it. Mm-hmm. And there's no place for me to go and try to send them, that this is wrong. Can you fix this? There's nothing like that available. It's just out there teaching people our language entirely the wrong way. And so if you have any guidance on how to, contact these platforms or what have you, and any guidance you have on things that might be already existing that might be more adaptable to our language use. And the other thing, and I absolutely am not anti-technology. My day job is IT. I do videos for our language. We use so much technology for our language use currently. But the effort that's going to take to create these platforms specifically for our language is, I think, beyond what I can imagine that we have people to do. Right now, we're scrambling to get enough people to teach our language, let alone learn our language. That's our biggest problem right now, is getting more people to learn our language. It's worrisome how few people are willing to spend the time and effort to do this. And putting together a board or what have you is problematic in my experience. Getting the people who are doing this work together to agree on things is not an easy thing. We have pretty small communities. So I would love to be the fellow who has the forward vision to get on this and do this and make it happen so future generations can do it. But the blunt truth is we just don't have enough people to keep our language afloat currently, let alone plan for the future this much. So there's a couple of things I wanted to mention in terms of this is going to be a huge ask for us to get to this place, but I would love to see it. I would love to be a part of it. But again, it's just a matter of getting the manpower together to do this. And you showed a couple of examples, like the Maori. Is there links that we can go to try to use some of these things to see what they're like to experience?
So the Maori example that I was discussing with I think the Te Kahui Roranga, that is just their governance model, which I think actually kind of applies to your second question. Let me answer the first one first, because I think both are really important. So the first one is around, there's a lot of these websites out there that claim, right, they, speak our languages or we can learn from them, and you review the examples and they're wrong. There's a lot of inaccurate information out there on the internet. And I think the only thing we can do, we can try to contact folks, we can do whatever sort of processes, but all we also can do is put facts out there and become the source of truth for our own languages, and make sure that everyone knows that if they look at information like that, that's not the truth. It needs to come from us, the representatives, the tribes, the community that is going to push this effort forward. Okay, and that's all we can do is educate others. And kind of following into your second question about, I understand, this is not a 5-year plan. It could be 10 years. It could be longer. And then hopefully into the future for a long ways. And it's really a lot to look at when we first see it. And we look at all of these different communities and organizations who are all looking into AI. But what are they all doing? They're all looking into it separately. They're all looking into their grant cycles. They're all looking into, what people they have, who they can get to learn these technologies and build this. And that's why I really was trying to cover the governing body, which I really feel like is important here. It's not to push anyone else away, but it's to talk about, we have a lot of different organizations that all want this to happen. Why are we not working together? And I understand people argue. People don't agree on things. But if they all have their voices at the table, and finally the outcome, the output, the decision will be made. Because everyone has agreed to coming to that table. And everybody can pull resources from these different groups, different tribes, nonprofits, all to kind of build forward for the future and to make it so we have the resources, we have the data, we have the expertise. We're more fluent speakers than are just a part of a couple organizations to make this happen. And that's what we really need. I think we can start with the MVP and things like those things, maybe before that. But really, as we start marching forward and we don't want to waste our efforts, we need to think about the long term and how we bring all those resources together to make a big project like this that's 5-10 years happen.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. Are you suggesting we use existing AI technologies to do our language teaching, or developing a new technology or using a different AI model specifically for the Southeast languages?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, a basic AI model that's already been trained, that doesn't know the complexity of our languages, is not going to be an option. Not a good one. Not one that's going to last for long term. It needs to be custom built. You can start from another language that's related. Start with languages that have some of those fundamental rules of our languages, but we have to build that customization to make it true to like our languages. And so, yeah, that's the path forward for that, I believe.
And then we have another question online. How are you dealing with lacuna/lexical gaps, where there is no one-to-one equivalent between a word in a source language and its target language?
That's a really good question. How I would think about that is kind of like this. There are other words and other terms that you can't create in English, other languages that we're familiar with. We have the idea of what those terms are, even if they don't relate to like concepts that we think about like in English. And so I think that those things are really, really important to capture. And it's really important to think about how we explain what those words mean, where they come from, and why they're important to our language. So when you're teaching them, there doesn't have to be an equivalent, or the equivalent is just teaching them why they're important to us. But we don't have to make them, English words or be able to say them in English. I don't think that that's a requirement for us. We just need to know them if we want to speak, the language that it's in, and kind of understand how they should be used and what they are.
And then we have one last comment. Just said, how ah. Well, if that's all the questions, both in person and online, then I'd like to say thank you all for coming and for watching Nathan Bennett's lecture. It was a wonderful lecture, and just a quick reminder, we do have another lecture tomorrow at 3 p.m. With Wayne Price. I forgot what the title of that one is, but okay. Thank you.
wonder how many times I didn't speak close enough for Lance there.
I don't know. It was an issue they didn't bring up until like the questions. So.
Well, I hope it's a hearable line. How are you? I'm Nathan. Welcome. It's very important. I really, really hope it comes together in the right way. That's the vision for us all. I tried to. The thing that was very difficult for me is when I was doing this, I'm just researching. Like I've been learning uphill myself, right? But I don't know a lot of Lingít or Sm'algyax things, so all I could find online is what I've learned. And I actually asked the ChatGPT, like we were bringing up the question, give me some examples. That was from ChatGPT. So we got it wrong, just based on your point that you were saying before, you know? Yeah. So, yeah.